I can bring you in warm, or I can bring you in cold.
So with the questions, I want to know, firstly, what Star Wars character do you least like writing for, or which is the most difficult for you?
Of my characters, because I don't write for the other stuff. No, all of mine feel good for me. They're all when you write a thing, there are always aspects. You always channel a part of yourself. So I like them all. Like, there's none that I dislike writing for. I'm having fun with everybody in the Mandalorian world.
Is there a character that you would say that you connect with more so than others?
Interesting. The Armorer is one of those magical characters where it's unclear who she is, where she came from, and she gets to be a truth teller and maybe speak some words that are a little more prophetic. So as a storyteller, that's a very valuable character to have because you could put words into her mouth because she's so mysterious.
So with the tone of Mandalorian, I love the tone. It's a Western, it's gritty. How do you consistently keep that tone as well as toeing the line with being family friendly?
I think just my own sensibility of doing what I feel comfortable with, because I'm a parent and I have kids, but I also know that you could get edgy in certain ways with kids. And there's other things where you want to avoid. You want to avoid cruelty, and you want to make sure that there are consequences, right, for actions. I think that's part of what makes Star Wars, people comfortable with Star Wars, is that bad things happen, and if you think back, there have been certain, in George's films, especially the prequels, there are atrocities, it's awful things, but there's a sense that there's a moral price to be paid for those things, that it's not like it's just happening haphazardly, that the world is a cruel place, but there are also good people, and the good people have to fight hard to hold tyranny in check and to make sure that you create a moral world. And that's very much a part of the Western, that you're out there, that these gunslingers, and sometimes you have characters who are morally ambiguous, who have to step up and do the right thing, and that's how they redeem themselves, especially in guarding the innocent.
Okay. So in terms of like passing on the Star Wars torch and things of that nature, obviously, you have let Dave Filoni and Rick Fumioka direct and write full episodes. What about these two make them right for that position?
Because, like yourself, they love it, they know it, and that's how we find who we're going to work with. It's really the one thing we all have in common is that we grew up with it, we respect it, and we want to play in that world. And like for Dave, he came out of animation. He became a live action director. Rick came out of independent film. Now he's an executive producer with us on this season. And he's a big part of the personality because he's kind of got a subversive sense of humor too. If you look at his episodes, he crosses weird lines in it, but it still feels like Star Wars.
Yeah.
So we could push the limits, but it has to still feel like Star Wars, and we have to ultimately feel that we're serving something more than just our own vision. It has to live up to what this world that George created. And we're lucky that we get to be in contact with him from time to time, and also have Filoni, who worked by his side for 10 years.
All right, so this is it. This is a real hard one.
Okay.
Prime Anakin Skywalker versus Prime Luke Skywalker. Who wins and how?
I think it has to be Anakin, right? I mean, it has to be. Prime Anakin, and there's so many different phases of it. But we never really got to see, we saw a little bit of Prime Luke with what we did.
Yeah.
We alluded to it. But who knows what he's been off to. But Anakin faced so many more challenges. He was in a more dynamic, he was in his prime in a more dynamic period in Star Wars history, right?
Yeah.
All right. Could I ask you some questions now?
Oh, let's go. I'm ready.
Okay.
I've been ready.
We have time, so we'll add a little bit here. You guys, I've seen you guys' reaction videos.
Yeah.
We like them a lot.
We like Star Wars a lot.
What we like is how thoughtful you are in how you react. And a lot of times with people, when you guys think of what it could be, it makes us think for a second, like, wait a minute, is that a better idea than what we have?
All right.
As you have watched our show, do you think that the choices that we've made compared to the conjecture that you've all had as you're going, do you find that even though it's different a lot of time from what you had, do you find that it's interesting but different, or do you find that it's that you think we should have gone down different paths for the opportunities of what we present?
I think there's situations that should be explained deeper, and I'm not sure why they don't get explained, but you can only think that it leads to things that are happening outside of the actual Star Wars universe.
Like what?
Like, oh man, this is getting sticky. Right
Okay,
now.
no, that's okay.
It's getting sticky
okay.
right there. Yeah. So,
But you're saying that more context.
more context to some things that may seem not important would do they'd go so
But
far.
you're a very specific audience where you know all the stuff, and so everything that's implied. But we try to imply. But we talk about, honestly, here's the interesting thing, is the way you all talk is how we kind of talk when we're in our writers'
can
room.
imagine.
So it is part of it. So we're actually getting to be, because we didn't make Star Wars. We're getting to play in that world, and you want to make sure that you're doing it in a way that's satisfying. So you think you'd want more context around why characters are making the choices they are?
Certain things. Around
As it
certain
speaks
things.
to canon in other areas?
It doesn't have to speak to canon in other areas, and this is where sometimes it's like, do you feel like your hands are tied because of canon? Because I feel like it's plain to see where canon's holding us back and where we need to go forward, and it doesn't sometimes get
I think it offers structure, and I think that part of what Filoni does really well, if you look at Clone Wars, I love how he danced in between what was established as canon with the
beautiful.
prequels, right?
Yeah.
And I would argue that what he did makes me appreciate the prequels more.
100%.
Because he understood that George always understood what he was doing. Dave understands all the intricacies of the actor. And if you hear him talking like on Star Wars Gallery, when he starts talking about Qui-Gon and about Luke, and that definitely informed how we're treating like how Luke treated Grogu. Like, no, it's not. Sometimes it's about friendship too. Sometimes it is about attachments in some ways. And that came from conversations I've had with Dave about what he thinks, how Qui-Gon differentiated from other Jedi, and maybe how that led to a lot of the downfall. So there's subtlety to it that people think about. And so we try to have it inform choices that we make. But not everybody wants to always have it laid out so much. So you're also, here's the other hard part, you're speaking to somebody, you want to have a new kid who's never seen Star Wars before be able to tune in, because you want to invite the next generation in. But then people like yourself who have given it all a lot of thought, you want to make sure you're being respectful of them as well. And that's the line you sort of always want to balance. And this was the same thing with the Marvel stuff too. You know, there's some people who didn't stay for the ending of after the credits in Iron Man. And so when you're introducing Nick Fury, you got to deal with the people who know exactly who that is, and you also have to deal with people who didn't stick around after the credits.
And how do you think your time working in the MCU has affected what you're doing here in Star Wars?
I think it made me understand how smart the audience is. So, like, we're taking a leap. Like, for example, we're jumping to the reuniting of the Mandalorian and Grogu at the top of season 3. End of season 2, they were saying goodbye. So if you didn't see the Book of Boba Fett, you might not know that. But I also know from the MCU that there's a lot of things that happen outside of the Avengers that if you didn't see those movies, you wouldn't necessarily know who these characters are. So I think that there's a sophistication, to be honest, because of people who create content around it. If I ever want to know what's going on with a show, like I missed it, it's been a year since I watched the show and it's back, I'll go on YouTube or Patreon or check in with people to help bring me up on it. So I think that the fans have created a community that they're creating more hours of content around the shows than the shows themselves are. So I think that there's an interplay between that we've grown to appreciate and rely on.
The last thing I want to ask is, do you have already a definitive end for The Mandalorian?
One of the things that I think is probably not going to happen is a big finale of now The Mandalorian's ending. To me, we're part of a flow. It's more like how George R.R. Martin does it with his stories of going from one generation to the next in Game of Thrones, you know, and having different perspectives in this world. I think that there are certain things I know are going to happen within this relationship, and certain things that we know, certain characters' involvement who are or are not involved with other events because, as you say, canon. So we have to color within those lines. And just like with Ahsoka, where is Ahsoka, where isn't Ahsoka, all of these things, we want to create consistency, because our big thing too is just to bring all Star Wars fans together. I don't care if you grew up like myself with the original trilogy, or prequels was your thing, or young people who are coming up with Clone Wars or the sequels. Like, it's all Star Wars, and we have to find a way to make it where everyone's welcome and everybody feels like this is for them.
I love that, and I appreciate your time today,
cheers.
John.
Pleasure talking to you. Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
This is the way.
This is the way. This is the way.